Hey everybody, so this is going to be our fourth video of this series, Acute Inflammation, Everything You Need to Know. And in this video we will be talking about what are the methods by which we terminate acute inflammatory response and what are the circumstances in which your leukocytes are damaging your own tissues, your own normal tissues. And what are the other functions of macrophages besides being phagocytes? So to start the discussion, I would like to ask you a question. Why do we want to terminate the acute inflammatory response? The answer is, with eliminating or eradicating the offending agent, your leukocytes damage your adjacent tissues as well. We want to have tight control over the acute inflammation to minimize the damage to adjacent tissues. Okay, so what are the methods we have in our body? Okay, you remember that I told you, suppose this is a cell in your body that has a receptor, and with that receptor, this cell recognizes any antigen, okay? This cell recognizes any antigen. What this cell will do, this cell will start secreting certain kinds of cytokines. And these cytokines will be secreted in a rapid burst, okay? And these cytokines will do some things. These cytokines will cause vasodilation, they will increase the vascular permeability, then they will increase the adhesion molecules on the surface of endothelium and leukocytes. And then some of these cytokines play a role of chemokines to guide the way to leukocytes at the site of inflammation, at the site where they are needed, okay? So all of these things are done by your cytokines. What happens when the leukocyte comes over here and internalize all of this thing, right? Recognizes first it with the help of a receptor and then destroys it. Okay, you know very well how it destroys it. It first forms phagosome, then it combines lysosome with the phagosome, forming phagolysosome, and then your leukocyte secretes reactive oxygen species and lysosomal enzymes into this phagolysosome. In doing so, some of these things, some of the ROX and lysosomal enzymes are secreted into the extracellular space. And when these things are secreted into the extracellular space, they are going to cause harm to your normal body tissues. Okay, so what happens once this offending agent has been eliminated by your leukocytes? This cell which will be producing cytokines and chemokines will stop producing them. Okay, so new cytokines will be stopped being produced. Okay, so there won't be production of any new cytokines, right? And what about those cytokines that have already been secreted by the cell? Those cytokines have very short half-lives and they die by apoptosis. Okay, so new cytokines are not being produced and the old ones are dying by apoptosis. So this is very important process. This is very important method. This characteristic of cytokines, having very short half-life, helps us to terminate acute inflammatory response. I hope this is clear because this is a very important topic and you should know about this concept. Okay. What are the other methods by which we are able to terminate acute inflammatory response? After a while, when offending agent has been eliminated, your macrophages start producing anti-inflammatory cytokine known as lipoxin. This one over here. Okay, what happens at first when there was offending agent and it was being recognized by certain kind of cells, your macrophages and other tissues of your body produce leukotrienes. Leukotriene is also a kind of inflammatory mediator. It has a role in increasing vascular permeability, increasing adhesion molecules on the surface of leukocytes. So at first, leukotrienes are being produced because we need them to start to elicit the inflammatory process. But once the offending agent has been eliminated, your macrophages and other tissues of your body start producing Lipoxin. Lipoxin is an anti-inflammatory arachidonic acid metabolite. And this switch from pro-inflammatory arachidonic acid metabolites into the anti-inflammatory arachidonic acid metabolite helps us to terminate the inflammatory process. I hope this is also clear. Now, what is the third method? After a while, when offending agent has been eliminated from the body, your macrophages and other adjacent cells start secreting massive amount of transforming growth factor beta and interleukin 10. Remember this interleukin 10, we have talked about like interleukin 1, which has role in inflammation. We talked about interleukin 6 again in the inflammation. Now we are talking about interleukin 10. Okay, so this is actually anti-inflammatory interleukin. So these were the method with which we were able to terminate the inflammatory process. Okay, at this point I would like to make it clear more. You know, cytokines are the substances which actually elicit the inflammatory response. When you stop producing them, you are actually breaking the chain of inflammation. You're breaking the chain of inflammatory process. So this was very important for us, and particularly this property of cytokines is very important for us. So this is very important, and these are the three major processes or methods by which we are able to terminate acute inflammatory process. Okay. Next thing I would like to talk about, I would first like to explain this to you on Blackboard. So what are the circumstances in which your leukocytes attack your normal tissue? Okay, I told you that during inflammatory process, when your leukocyte recognizes an antigen, it will engulf it and obviously it will make phagosome, that phagolysosome, and it will secrete ROX, that your reactive oxygen species, and lysosomal enzymes into that phagosome. And some of it will be secreted into your extracellular space, and this thing over here, these both ROX and lysosomal enzymes, will cause damage to your adjacent tissues, right? This is the one method in which your leukocytes are attacking. Leukocytes are not attacking actually, leukocytes are causing harm to your normal tissues. Obviously, they are being protective for you because they are trying to, at first place, they are trying to eliminate this offending agent. But some of their ROX and lysosomal enzymes are affecting or damaging your normal tissues. This was one thing in which your leukocytes have some role in your injury to normal tissues. Okay, what are the other methods? One more method, very important. All the leukocytes are trying to help you. They are trying to eliminate the offending agent, but they will cause some damage to your adjacent tissues. Okay, suppose this is your glomerular basement membrane. Okay, and in the glomerular basement membrane, you have deposited some kind of antigen antibody complex. There are a variety of diseases in which you actually deposit antigen antibody complex in your glomerular basement membrane. So you have these complexes deposited within your basement membrane of glomerulus. Now suppose your leukocyte comes over here and it recognizes this antigen antibody complex, but this antigen antibody complex is tightly deposited within the glomerular basement membrane that it cannot be engulfed by this macrophage or neutrophil, your phagocyte basically. So what your phagocyte does is, obviously it knows that it is very harmful substance, it is an offending agent, and we need to eliminate it. So your phagocyte secretes reactive oxygen species and lysosomal enzymes onto this complex, antigen antibody complex, and in doing so, obviously this normal tissue of your basement membrane will be destroyed as well. So this is another example in which your leukocyte is actually trying to be protective for you because it's trying to eliminate this offending antigen antibody complex, but in doing so it is causing harm to your normal tissue. Okay, this is another example. And one more example is very famous gout. What happens in gout is, suppose this is your joint. In your joints, particularly in your first metatarsophalangeal joint, you have deposited urate crystal over here. Okay, what happens? Your phagocytes come over here, and then your phagocyte recognizes this with a certain kind of receptor, recognizes this urate crystal with a certain kind of receptor, and then your phagocyte actually engulfs this. But this urate crystal is extremely stubborn that it is not being broken down into smaller pieces by your phagocytes, because phagocytes have whatever kind of enzymes your phagocytes have, they are not able to kill this thing. They're not able to, actually not kill, they're not able to destroy this thing. Okay? They're not able to destroy this thing. Then eventually what happens, this urate crystal ruptures your neutrophil or macrophage, phagocyte basically, and comes out. And now see what has happened. Your phagocyte has been ruptured, and now all of the substances, all of the ROX and lysosomal enzymes will be secreted into the joint space, and these will cause harm to your joint. This will cause harm to your normal joint. So this is another example in which your phagocytes are being protective for you, but they are actually causing some harm to your adjacent tissues. Okay. There are some other examples as well in which, okay, in these three examples that I have told you, in these examples your phagocytes are actually helping you. They are actually, at first place, they are actually trying to capture the offending agent, but in the next examples they are not helping you to eliminate the offending agent. Instead they are harming your, at first place they are harming your own tissues. So well-known example of such circumstances is your autoimmune disease, any kind of autoimmune disease. Let's take an example of Hashimoto thyroiditis. Suppose these are your thyroid gland lobes, this is your isthmus, this is another lobe. Okay, what happens that in your thyroid gland you have an enzyme known as thyroid peroxidase into it. So there is an enzyme in your thyroid gland, thyroid peroxidase, and your body has formed antibody against this thing over here. What happens, your antibody recognizes this thyroid peroxidase enzyme, and then your leukocyte binds to this antibody, binds its Fc receptor binds its Fc receptor with the Fc portion of the antibody, and then your neutrophil or macrophage tries to engulf all of this and destroy it. It will actually destroy your thyroid peroxidase, and in doing so your neutrophil also secretes a massive amount of cytokines and chemokines to call other neutrophils to eliminate all of the thyroid peroxidase enzyme present within the thyroid gland. And in doing so, you are actually destroying your thyroid tissue, your thyroid gland. Are you getting my point? In this scenario, we don't want our leukocytes to act on the thyroid peroxidase because it's a normal component of thyroid gland. Everyone has it, and it has the role in formation of thyroid hormones. We don't want neutrophils to be activated and destroy thyroid peroxidase and eventually thyroid gland. So in this scenario, your leukocytes are actually damaging your tissue, and they're not trying to eliminate an offending agent. Okay. One more example in which your leukocytes actually damage your own body tissue, or they elicit an inflammatory response in your normal body tissues where inflammatory response is not at all needed, is your allergy. Okay, in order to understand the process of allergy, you should know the proper definition of allergy. What is the definition of allergic reaction? Allergic reaction is an exaggerated immune response of your body towards a benign antigen, towards a harmless antigen. Suppose someone has rhinitis and that person has allergy, and the person is allergic from these pollens. These pollens are literally harmless, but your body has exaggerated immune response towards these pollens. Okay, what happens if someone's body has pollens? Okay, suppose pollens are circulating in your bloodstream. What happens then? There is a cell in your body known as mast cell, and mast cell has granules filled with histamine, cytokines, chemokines, and leukotrienes, prostaglandins, a lot of pro-inflammatory products. Okay, so what happens, and on the surface of this mast cell you have your IgE antibody, and IgE antibody is acting as a receptor for this. Okay, so what happens, these pollens will be recognized by certain kind of IgE antibody, and then this IgE antibody will cause the degranulation of mast cell. What do I mean by degranulation of mast cell? It means that mast cell will be ruptured and all of the granules will be coming out of the mast cell and circulating into the blood, and these granules will eventually secrete all of these components like histamine, cytokines, leukotrienes, prostaglandins, everything, chemokines as well. And this thing, obviously, when you have histamine, you are actually eliciting the immune response. You are causing vasodilation, then you're increasing vascular permeability, increasing the adhesion molecules on the surface of endothelium and your leukocytes, and then you are producing some kinds of chemokines too. Capture the leukocytes at the site of a vending agent. Okay, so in this scenario, you don't want your leukocytes to act against pollen, because pollen is literally harmless. But in this process, in this circumstance, your leukocytes are harming your normal tissues, and you don't need it. There's no vending agent, obviously, but it is harming your normal tissues. Okay, so let's read the text together. Leukocyte mediated tissue injury. Injury to normal tissue during eradication of offending agent. I told you this already, that your leukocytes secrete some of their reactive oxygen species and lysosomal enzymes into the extracellular space. We have talked about this already. And then if antigen is deposited on the flat surface like glomerular basement membrane, if antigen antibody complex is deposited on the glomerular basement membrane, it is very hard for the neutrophils or macrophages to engulf it. Instead, what they do, they start secreting lysosomal enzymes and ROX on the surface of that antigen antibody complex, and in doing so they are causing harm to your adjacent tissues, adjacent normal tissues. Then urate crystals, I already told you, urate crystals are engulfed by the macrophages and neutrophils, but they are not being broken down into smaller pieces. Instead, what happens, urate crystal comes out, urate crystal ruptures your phagocyte and comes out of the cell and secreting a huge amount of ROX. Okay, what are the other functions of macrophages besides being phagocytes? Macrophages secrete certain kind of cytokines that amplify inflammatory process, and then they have also the ability to secrete certain kind of cytokines that limit the inflammation. So they have dual action, and these two actions are exact opposite to each other. So this is amazing. Okay, so macrophages secrete certain kind of growth factors that stimulate the proliferation of endothelial cells. They stimulate the proliferation of your fibroblasts, they stimulate the synthesis of collagen, and they stimulate certain enzymes that remodel connective tissue remodeling. Okay, they actually stimulate the connective tissue remodeling. So this was our video, this was our actually 4 video on acute inflammation, and I hope you understood everything very well. If you have any kind of questions, you can always ask in comments, and best of luck.